Hi there, this is the second devlog for my game that I'm creating, and for this devlog, I wanted to get the main base of the game's mechanics put into place. The last devlog was me just getting basic stuff put into place, just to have something to build off of, and in this one, I'm actually getting, proper mechanics, like an inventory system and a building system. And for both of those, I followed a tutorial, and instead of just copy and pasting code, I actually paid attention to what I was doing, and I now have a sort of understanding of what each thing does. And these tutorials are not made to do the entire thing for you. They're just made to get the basics of whatever it is that the tutorial is about, instead of coding the entire thing to be game ready for you. So for the inventory system, I followed along, did most of the things that the tutorial does, and a lot of it was completely unnecessary for what I wanted to do. Like, my vision is something along the lines of the forest, where everything is just laid out in front of you, and it's just basically like a glorified list of items. And this tutorial is a slot-based system, and because a lot of the features that a slot-based system has is completely irrelevant to what I want to do in the final game, I just completely ignored a lot of it. So I have the most basic inventory that you can possibly have, and it's basically just a glorified list of items to show up. Where I'm at right now, you can use items, you can consume them, and you can drop them, which is pretty much all I need to do everything else. Because it's very simple and pretty modular, honestly, I can build off of it very easily. And the same thing goes for the building system. It's very modular, it's very basic, and it's pretty much what I need to get going. Now for the rest of the video, it's a bunch of smaller things that I worked on in the past month. So for the rest of this video, most of the things here I did myself. So what can I say? I'm a programmer. So in the last video, I showed that I made a tree that you can cut down, and in reality, you just hit it 3 times and it just completely disappears out of existence and just drops a log. So this time, I gave the tree an actual stump with an animation of it falling down, which is literally just spawning a blueprint in-game and just having that just physics, just let the world handle it and have that fall down, and having that log pop into an actual item log. And the stump stays behind, and over time that stump grows back into a normal tree, which you can then chop down again and just repeat. Or if you don't want a tree there, you can break the stump and a tree will never grow there ever again, so you have to sit there and live with your choices of what you've just done. So the next feature I did was fall damage. I didn't do this one by myself. I tried, failed, then I looked it up and found this screenshot, which is way better than what I came up with. I think what it does is it takes the velocity of the player and calculates the speed at which it changes and applies that to the player as damage. I don't know. There's a lot of lines and math here, so I don't really know what's happening. But it works, so thanks to that guy. And with this system, I found out that if the buffer for fall damage is low enough and the player speed is high enough, you can get whiplash, which I think is really funny, so I'm keeping it for now. So the next thing is the ability to hide in bushes. Once again, a me original. So I want stealth to be an aspect of the game of survival, so I'm planning to have it where you can hide in bushes to escape from bigger enemies. So I threw this system together, where once you enter a bush, it puts you into a stealth mode, and when you leave it, it takes you out of stealth mode. And in order to get this working properly, I needed to future-proof it. I guess that's the word for it. So if I'm generating a landscape and the environment, I am 99% sure that bushes will either be placed inside of each other or very, very close to each other. And if you made it just simply enable or disable the stealth when you enter or exit the bush, it just completely breaks. So I needed to add a buffer type thing So when you exit a bush and immediately re-enter a bush, it doesn't just explode on itself. So how this works is you enter a bush and it sets a variable saying that you have entered a bush, and then it adds to a counter that I have clamped to have a maximum of 1 and a minimum of 0, and then it activates stealth, which is just a variable, and it checks if the number... God, I suck at explaining things. It checks if that integer is greater than or equal to 1, and if it is, then it sets you to be in stealth mode, and if it isn't, then you're not in stealth mode. I'm checking that on both when you enter and when you exit. So when you exit, it first checks if you re-entered a bush, which is set when you entered a bush while previously just being in a bush. Doing that also adds to the counter. So if you have re-entered a bush, it sets that you're in a bush still. I don't think I need that there, but I'm too scared to get rid of it, and it works, so I'm just going to leave it as is. But it unchecks that you have re-entered a bush, and it adds again to the integer. But if you haven't re-entered a bush, this means you're leaving a bush. It checks that you are no longer in a bush, takes away from that integer. It runs the activate stealth event again, but this time the variable is at 0, the integer is at 0, and that means you're no longer in a bush. Holy shit, that took me 3 minutes to explain all that. And yes, I could probably do this code so much better. I'm just scared to touch any of this because every time I did, it broke. So I'm leaving it. It works. I'm not touching this until I'm confident enough. So the next thing I did was messed with the companion a little bit, and I simply just added the ability for him to be called from anywhere and made it if you hit him, this happens. And on top of all that, I also gave him the freedom of movement. So when he is not following the player, he now just roams around. And yes, that could probably lead to him getting lost, which is why I made it so you can call him. You can also now respawn, which the way I coded it looks like ass and is definitely getting replaced later, because look at that. That looks horrible. Then I implemented a day-night cycle with the level blueprint, and then I found out about this component that you can apply directly to the sunlight, and it just feels more right, so I'm going with that option. So the next thing is health regen. So while I was doing a bunch of stuff with the inventory and implementing the ability to actually eat and drink stuff, I realized that there was no actual way to heal your health. So I made it where if your hunger and thirst are both above 80, your health increases by an increment of 2 every 5 seconds. And if only your hunger or thirst is above 80, it increases by 1 every 5 seconds. And obviously if it's less than 80, then you don't heal at all, which is most likely going to change. But if you recently took damage, then it waits to regen your health for 10 seconds and then it starts going again. So there will never be an instance of like your health decreasing and then immediately increasing. That just feels weird and clanky and unpolished. So I also made a simple display world to debug stuff and have a visual of how much I added to the game and to just have everything in one spot. And on top of that, I also created the world, the open world where everything will take place in. And it's probably way too big, I'll be honest, but I won't really know until I start designing it. And I decided to just create it now so I have it. And it uses world partition, which I have no idea how to use properly. So add that to the list of 1,000 things I have to learn. Next up is movement. So I tweaked the movement a little bit, but my plan for the next video is to properly get the movement down to where I'm happy with it. I just did this because I was bored and I didn't want to work on the inventory system. The next thing is a dynamic HUD, and this was a late night thought, and I had the idea that the HUD should fade in or out depending on what happens to the player. So I coded it where if your hunger, thirst, health, and stamina change, their respective bars will fade in and then fade back out. You know, this is one of those examples where it sounds so much better in your head, and then you do it and you realize it looks like ass, but I'm keeping it anyway and I'm making it a setting to enable or disable. Now the next thing, Once again, another feature I added because I was bored while working on another system. This time it's a cheat menu that I slowly added onto over the course of this month, and it just has a bunch of features that I feel like would be useful to me at some point in a later date. You can also access this in-game if you click on the pause text 3 times in the pause menu and then press right shift while in-game. And right now this works in the full build of the game, so when I ever release this game, now you know. And speaking of menus, I added a proper options menu with a couple of things, and I slowly added onto it. And the brightness slider had an interesting bug. Like, why it changes the entire engine's brightness. Like, even outside of it. Why would you ever, why? Now on the title screen, I added a build version on the bottom right, and I also added the title of the game, so that makes sense. So that's pretty much it for this video. I appreciate if you stuck this far. I'm pretty happy with where the game is right now. You can technically play it. Granted, it's very boring, but you can survive in it, which is good enough for me. Well, I mean, it's not good enough. Like, there's still a lot of work, but you get what I mean, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. Bye.